Good morning. I'm going to call to order. It is now 10:16, and I'm going to hand it over to Favor to begin.
Nate Butler,
Present.
Rhonda Cartwright, Preston Castile, Dr. Jenna Chasson, Dr. Susanna Craig, Dr. Margaret Mary Sulintic Dow,
Present.
Michael Falk, Representative Jason Hughes, Mary Beth Hughes, Dejanay Clark Jackson, Deshae Oaks, Caroline Romer, Stephen Swiver, Kelly Chu. We have
So we have two new members, and we want to give them a chance to introduce themselves to us. Steve Schreiber and Mary Beth Hughes. You just want to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Mary Beth Hughes, representing Lobby. I serve as Lobby's Director of Education and Workforce Development. And I'm very excited to be here. Look forward to working with each of you.
My name's Stephen Swiver. I'm here with the Governor's Office. I'm the Policy Advisor and Chief Resilience Officer here at the Governor's Office, and I'm excited to participate in this commission.
Thank you. Welcome, guys. All right, members, in your package, you'll find minutes from December Louisiana Literacy Advisory Commission meeting. Please take a moment to review those minutes, and at the appropriate time, I entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved. Second.
So I have a motion by Dr. Susan Craig and a motion by Dr. Margaret Mary. Is there any opposition to that motion? Once again, I have a motion from Dr. Suzanne Craig and a second from Dr. Margaret Mary to approve the minutes of the December 2023 Louisiana Literacy Commission Advisory Commission meeting. Hearing no opposition, the motion passes. All right. Consideration of proposed revisions to Bulletin 1903, Louisiana Handbook for Students with Dyslexia. In response to Act 266 of 2023 regular legislative session. Chair will ask for a motion and a second to receive a consideration of the proposed revisions to Bulletin 1903, Louisiana Handbook for Students with Dyslexia in response to Act 266 of 2023 regular legislative session. Charlie Long, LDOE Diverse Learners will present on.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Charlene Long, and I am a member of the Diverse Learner Division, and I'm happy to be here today to talk about some of these proposed revisions. And want to start out by thanking those of you who provided feedback and input. It was definitely very valuable, and we appreciate your time in reviewing and giving us feedback. So to start with, we looked at the definitions, and some terms were added. Some terms were added and some were updated and some were removed. Only a few were removed, and those were due to some feedback that they might be a little confusing, a little too technical, and they weren't mentioned in the bulletin. So those two were removed. Frequently asked questions, at risk. We get that a lot. What does at risk mean? And it's mentioned in the bulletin. So that one was added, as well as rapid automatic naming was added. And then there was some information that we added to the local education agency responsibilities. Not a lot, just tried to clarify some. And one of the main things you probably noticed throughout was we wanted to add that when considering dyslexia, there's a member of the team who's been trained in identifying dyslexia and recognizing characteristics. So we did add that there to the LEA responsibilities, as well as using the multisensory structured language and literacy program. Throughout, you'll also notice that characteristics of dyslexia was removed. Just again, to try to clarify it straight to the point. And so that was removed there under the LEA responsibilities. Also on C, the report, the annual report that is to be submitted on the occurrence of dyslexia, just some of the criteria was added there. So it's right here in the dyslexia handbook, what needs to be reported by LEAs on the December 15th. For school level responsibilities, again, we wanted to point out someone who is trained in recognizing dyslexia should be a member of that committee when they're discussing a student's scores and data that might represent dyslexia. We also added here some information to make it clear on what could be used when these school level meetings take place with the SBLC. What can they look at? What data can they look at? Those performance tasks, and of course for the older grades, there's written assignments, and looking at those and comparing, are they grade level? Are they not? Just tried to add some more detail there for those SBLC committee responsibilities. Also, again, those members of the committee, when they review the data, to look at dyslexia, we removed that at least 2 additional education professionals, just because we added the member of the team that has knowledge of dyslexia. So we felt like that was a pretty solid team. Some ideas for those specialists on campuses could be a speech language pathologist. It could be an educational diagnostician, again, that's trained in recognizing dyslexia, a school psychologist who may have been trained, dyslexia practitioner, dyslexia therapist, and or any person that's been trained. And again, this is to be involved in those conversations when they're considering dyslexia. And then professional development on the identification of dyslexia, as well as students with skills below grade level are to receive interventions in reading improvement plan. That, as you know, is in one of the literacy acts. And we just felt it was important to note here that these students, if their screening is at risk, they are getting interventions, and they're getting an improvement plan that's going to be tracked. The last thing, or if the screening results indicated the student's at risk for dyslexia, the parent should be notified within 30 days, and the school should determine through history, et cetera. We listed, again, more specific things there of what the SBLC can look at. So they're going to get that parent history, the psychometric assessment, et cetera, when they're considering this. So those were the school level responsibility revisions. And then we also have on the back, originally what initiated the SBLC committee was if somebody requested, so a parent or teacher. We added here that an at-risk screening, especially with the inclusion of the new kindergarten dyslexia screener, we wanted to add that, as well as in alignment with IDEA child find mandate, that if there's any doubt that a student might not be on level, might be at risk, their data might show that they're at risk, then they are to be evaluated and looked at further. So we wanted to add that there. SBLC can also refer, another step where SBLC can refer students if they have decisions that they make at the end of their meetings. They can refer the student to pupil appraisal for support services. That was added. Sometimes that's a resource that schools can use to problem solve new interventions, how to track data, that kind of thing. So we wanted to add that there, that there is somebody else that they could reach out to. And also they could return to the classroom without any further strategies or interventions. That would be if the committee agreed that the student was on track, making progress, and then they would just keep an eye on that student's progress. And the SBLC can repeat this process if concerns regarding dyslexia or reading difficulties emerge later. And the private evaluations, there we wanted to add that, again, someone with knowledge of dyslexia helps review those private evaluations to make the determination of next steps. Screening requirements. Those changed a little bit with the universal literacy screener. The DIBELS screening had a lot of the skills were being assessed with this new DIBELS universal screening. So those were adjusted there under B to just change the names and then review and then removed the part that in spring that they're to be screened because they're going to be screened through the early literacy screener. So that's taken care of. And also Act 520 includes the development of those literacy programs for all students in K through 3rd. In previous versions of Bulletin 1903, if scores showed deficits on those screeners, so the universal screeners, then students were to be given additional screenings. Well, DIBELS 8th edition covers those additional screenings. So all children are being screened in those areas. So what was added here was in alignment with the International Dyslexia Association skills that they have research that shows that they have a high indication of students who are at risk, that these are the skills that they would want to be screened. So we kind of added those here. You'll see onset rhyme, and then screened and blending, onset rhyme and rhyming, and then manipulation of the phonemes, as well as the rapid automatic naming skills of colors, objects, and numbers. Letters was removed there because that's a part of the universal screener. So all children will be screened in that area. And then we added and letter sound recognition. Again, that is a characteristic of students who are struggling and may be at risk for dyslexia, can struggle with that letter sound association. So that was added there. Next, that data can be used to inform decisions and to provide evidence-based interventions, and just monitoring that progress and determine the response to the intervention and the rate of improvement using that MTSS system. And IDEA Child Find mandate was added to the bottom here, just as a reminder that requires all school districts to proactively identify, locate, and evaluate all students who are suspected of having a disability. And lastly, the multisensory structured language and literacy program criteria. Just a little phrase was added there that it utilizes all the senses to enhance student memory and learning. That was added with feedback from one of the members of the subcommittee. So those are the revisions, deletions, additions that we have now. And hopefully they've been shared with you, and we definitely would welcome your feedback and anything else you have to add.
Okay, the commission has the opportunity to ask questions.
Good morning, Caroline. I'm with the Louisiana Charter School Association, and I'm not an educator. So sometimes my questions remind me, law now requires schools to do professional development in the area of dyslexia. Like when we say you have to have someone that's trained in that is required in law for them to have that training somewhere. I start thinking about some of my standalone small schools. Do they have those folks? So it helps me know the law says you have to have somebody in the building.
Right. So originally in 1903, that was one of the responsibilities of school systems, was to provide training on dyslexia. So yes,
Yes.
it is. Yes.
Good. That's helpful to me. Thank you. And then second question, just with some of the additional, like on the back page, you were talking about some of the things identified. DIBELS does currently cover those things.
Does. Yes, it covers those sub skills. Now the extra skills, if a child is at risk, those could be found in curriculum-based measures, those sort of things. It's rhyming, that sort of thing. If they want something more standardized, their SPLC could guide them with certain measures, like a quick phonics screener or something that could screen those skills.
And then my last thing, I'm a sicko that actually reads legislation on the weekends, maybe with a glass of wine. And I did see a couple bills specifically around dyslexia. Have you seen those bills? Not to go into deep dive on them. Will that mean that we have to come back and change? If those were to pass, will we have to come back and change these policies?
Yeah, we would need to update.
And not a way to do this in anticipation? I guess you can't, never mind. Okay, yeah. Well, because it's about not using dibbles, correct? So I was wondering, could it just say, or whatever's approved in law? Or so, just trying to say.
Right, we'd have to make some updates to 1903.
Okay,
But to your point, Caroline, I wouldn't say it's too late now, but the bills have been filed, and so we'll just continue to provide information for the fiscal notes, as we're responsible for as an agency, and then continue to work with all of our stakeholders around what those regulations will look like translated into continuing in the future.
and again, if you've not seen it, it's just strictly legislation that would allow flexibility on that screen. What is it? Okay, thank you.
Any public comment? That's perfect. All right, so motion in a second to accept the consideration of the proposed revisions to both the 1903 Louisiana Handbook for Students with Dyslexia in response to Act 266 of 2023 regular legislative session. Motion to approve.
Shay Oaks, motion.
Third motion. And second by Mayor Beck. So once again, I have a motion from Deshae Oaks and a second from Mayor Beth Hughes to receive the consideration of proposed revisions to Bulletin 1903, Louisiana Handbook for Students with Dyslexia in response to Act 266 of 2023 regular legislative session. Are there any objections? Hearing no opposition, the motion passes. Thank you. Consideration of updated report regarding the literacy coaching initiative. I will ask for a motion in a second to receive a consideration of the updated report regarding the literacy coaching initiative. First by Caroline Romer. Second by Dr. Suzanne Briggs. So here to present on this initiative is Dr. Phaedra Early.
Yeah, I'll just say a few words about our literacy coaching initiative. This is something that started a few years ago. We had if you all can recall, we had a $2 million appropriation from the state legislature. I believe it was back in 2020 to explore and research a literacy coaching pilot. And so it's really exciting to now be here 4 years later and see the fruits of this labor. And we've been really fortunate to have Dr. Phaedra Early, who's here with us today, really leading the charge the last 4 years. We started in 13 schools across the state. And now to see really at scale our literacy coaching work, it's very exciting. And I believe, my personal opinion is that our literacy coaching work and the fruits of that labor, again, is some of the reason why we're seeing our initial signs of success in literacy, and we're seeing that trajectory change in some of our student outcomes. I believe that literacy coaching work is super important, and it's something that I know has come up during session. I expect it will come up again. Because just a reminder, the funding that we've been able to use for our literacy coaching work over the last several years began with that first $2 million appropriation from the state legislature. And then it has been funded from our federal grants. We have 2 large federal literacy grants, and we have our state set aside dollars from stimulus funding that we've been able to utilize for our literacy coaching work across the state. Both of those are drawing to an end. And although the goal of literacy coaching work is always that you're building capacity in your classroom educators and in your school building leaders, so that those literacy coaches are less needed over time as they build the capacity in others. We know there is still so much more that needs to be done in our state around literacy. And so this is super important work that I think has really can be contributed as one of the number one initiative that we have launched over the last few years that has had a significant impact on our children. So we're really happy to spotlight that work here today. And Dr. Early has been on the front end of this work throughout the last 4 years. So happy to have you present for us.
Good morning. Very excited to be here to share some updates that's going on with literacy coaching. As Dr. Casson said, I've been with this project for the last 4 years, but within the last 2 years, I've been blessed to have two support staff that are out there in the field, supporting the coaches, going into schools, and making sure that the work that we're producing at the department is getting out to everyone that's there. That's Natalie Chester and Kaylin Harris. So a lot of the work that we'll talk about today is things that they're doing. So our strategy for this year has been to 3 main focuses: our monthly communities of practice, our field visits, and our coaching support visits. So monthly, we have a community of practice that hosts about, our numbers run about 150 to sometimes 200 coaches that may come, that pop onto Zoom, and the ladies give them professional development. Now, when we say literacy coaches, it's not just literacy coaches. We know that there are several names. They may be instructional coaches. They may be master teachers. We've had a previous coach that's now a part of the aspiring principal. She's assistant principal, and she's the literacy leader. So we open these meetings to anyone who's a literacy leader in the building. They're able to come in once a month, every third Thursday of the month. They sit, the ladies get things that are going out in the field, whether it's high quality instructional materials that are needed. How do we use this? If Dibbles is up, our middle of the year, how can I make my middle of the year data relevant? How can I roll it back? How can I bring it back to my school system? So they give them practices with that. It's about 4 hours. We foster an environment where it's a free space for them to communicate, to network, to see what's going on in other systems, to ask questions. So that has been a very vital piece to our work, because then in that stance, we're able to hear what they're saying, and then we're able to come back and produce things that are going on in our literacy library, resources that are needed, conversations that are needed. So a very pivotal piece of our literacy coaching strategy. We also do field visits, which are a highlight. Actually getting out to the schools. We like to meet with the department, and we like to go see what's going on. We like to interact with our coaches. We like to interact with our systems to let them know that things that come down, we're here to support them. So that's been another highlight, making people warm and fuzzy and wanting to see us. They are inviting us in. We have an open platform when it comes to that. Even going to family literacy nights in the evening. So we are excited about those things, and our coaching support visits, because we know that even though you're a coach, you're the guru in that building, you're the support person in that building, the expert, but you also need support. How can we support you? How can we guide you? So our 3 main literacy strategies that we've been working on this year. So here are our goals for our community of practice. Again, that's once a month, every third Thursday. Our goals are to build that strong relationship, to share success and learning, to support our school district's plan initiatives, to deepen the understanding of the science of reading for those coaches, to have effectiveness of their coaching, to learn and grow their professional skills, to implement high-quality instructional materials, and to promote the use of resources with our Louisiana Belize Literacy Library. We're also just going to give you a chance to just highlight some of the topics that we've had thus far this year, using that literacy screener data to improve your reading proficiency. We've highlighted dyslexia, and actually had a member of the commission come and present for us. We've given the coaches time to reflect on their practices, and with Dibbles and the rollout of our new literacy screen and how can we take that information and improve our student outcomes. We're going to give you a quick glance of our meeting attendance. This is 22-23. Again, those are literacy coaches, master teachers, anyone that's a literacy leader in the building. To 23-24. And I'm gonna smile at February. We had a glitch at the department where our system was down. And one of the ladies had to get on their Zoom privately and it was Mardi Gras. And we still had coaches zooming in on their couches wanting to get that information. So they really do have a community going on. If you wanna listen to literacy. They may have been taking a little break, huh? But yeah, a really good community of support for them. Here are some of our participating systems. I'll give you a chance to glance over. And the ladies, at the end of each meeting, they do a rating, a feedback, a jot form where you're able to ask different questions so they are able to rate their effectiveness to see how everything's going with it. High ratings for them. Materials and resources are fab. They want more. They like it's their part where they want more. Like we have to get them out the Zoom to get that information, but it shows this that there's a need that teachers do want more. They want more support. Our impact on coaching. And then we wanted to highlight some of the literacy coaching field visits that we've gone, some of the places that we've actually gone in, having those coaching supports, whether it's doing walkthroughs with systems, sitting down with ILTs with them, again, going to family literacy nights, just anywhere where we can, if you invite us, we're going to come with a smile and support you anyway. We do have partners that help us with that support that work, Attune, the Center for Literacy and Learning, and Glean. We've also had all three of them do presentations for our communities of practice. They're going to be at Teacher Leader Summit doing some work with us also. And when we highlight our field visits, we're looking at those coaching relationships. We're paying attention to that high quality instructional materials and how you're being used and how can we support that. We're looking at that phonics instruction and making sure that all of that Act 108 training, science of reading, that now that we've gotten that learning, how can we roll it into our curriculum and make sure everything is rolling out right. We also have those additional literacy supports through intervention and that after school literacy night. So of the team, we are the warm and fuzzy people. We like pictures, so we got to give you some pictures. So these are some things in action with our partners. We have the center with Pam. She's given some professional learning. I think they've gone through walkthroughs and it was a debrief, just helping that system with things that are going on in their building. We have Blair from Glean. She's doing probably dialogical coaching. And Caitlin Ross with Attune, the use of high quality instruction. Giving you some pictures of some of the things that we're seeing in the field. Pictures using that core curriculum, having those charts out, backing up our guidebooks. We've been doing a lot of visits with that intervention, seeing the teachers at work, asking the question of as you're working with your small group, what are the rest of the people doing? And of course, our family literacy night, really trying to pull our parents in, helping those students, those teachers with the support of how can you best support your parents because you know that they are key to our children learning. And that is our highlight of our literacy coaching. If y'all need us at any point, please reach out. Yes, Dr. Margaret Bear.
Dr. Early, this is great. Thank you. I appreciate all your work. I had a question on slide 21. on the impact on coaching. And so if I understand that, you're simply asking the coaches from the beginning of a session to the end of a session. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Are there plans to also look at the impact of coaches on teachers' practice and student outcomes?
Yes, yes, most definitely.
Yes, that is data that we've looked at. We've also looked at it in partnership with the Center for Literacy and Learning over at Janae. They've done a significant amount of research on the literacy coaches that they support and examining those improved student outcomes.
My question was somewhat similar about what is the data telling us? I've heard you say, Dr. Chasson, you said number one initiative that has taken place as far as impact. I also heard you talk about dollars going away. I would love to understand, so what's the game plan as we do reach the end of those grants and those federal dollars? Is that a new legislative ask? Like, how can we be supported as advocates?
Yes, I think it can be, and that's something that we're talking with stakeholders about. It can be a new legislative ask. It's also about timing. So the funding will be available for next year, though it is a reduced amount. And so it will not be able to fully support what we have at scale right now. As there is less funding available for next year than there has been the past several years. So we would be looking at potentially a reduced amount of literacy coaches for next year, but still having the programming available at least. But yes, I think absolutely as we look ahead, it's keeping an eye out for additional federal grants, which there haven't yet been any applications released. And so keeping an eye out for that, for other federal opportunities, which we are hopeful about in the future. But I think it's also considering as a state, the impact of this work, the importance of this work, and is it a place where we want to invest in state dollars?
Well, and I would also hope, again, with the data indicating, the impact, that districts themselves would also consider investing some of their own local, let's call it, or MFP dollars into this type of work. To that point too, I'm curious, I see, so is it still considered a pilot? You started 2020, it was a pilot, but now it's no longer
It was
that.
a 20, it hasn't been a pilot, the last 2 years. We had a pilot that first year, that we used with that original $2 million appropriation in those original 13 schools. And we learned a lot from that pilot. That pilot actually, has informed all of our literacy strategy moving forward. It told us that we needed, additional materials that we have since built as a state. It taught us a lot about what our literacy screener could look like as a state, about our Act 108 training and what that looks like when it was implemented really effectively. And that we'll talk about in just a few moments. That's our next agenda item, but that came the following year in legislation 2021. And so that pilot really informed a lot of the work that we're still doing today around the literacy coaching work, but then other initiatives as well that have had impact. I think to your point too, Caroline, about school systems investing in this work themselves. I think there's a variety of funding sources they can use for it. I think they have been asked to match over the last several years as we have allocated funding. We have not allocated 100% of salary and benefits. They have been asked to match some portion of that over the last several years. So for next year, they would be asked to match even more as we have left to allocate of those federal funds. At the same time, they no longer have their ESSER funding throughout next school year available. And so they're going to be strapped more tightly than ever before. And so I think it's about looking at the impact, examining what's making a difference, and then everyone making some really tough choices about what's most important moving forward. So we've been working with school systems across the state who are having to get really creative in what this will look like for them. And so we've been trying to work hand in hand with them on what are some creative solutions of how to use some of your federal dollars? How might you utilize your Title I, your Title II? What might it look like for a literacy coach to teach part of the day and then literacy coach part of the day if you can't afford a full-time literacy coach? And so really thinking through with them, what are some different opportunities to still provide educators on your campuses the support, the robust support that a great, effective, trained literacy coach is able to provide at a time when we know, the purse strings will be tightened.
Thank you.
And just one follow-up question. I'm literacy, not numeracy, so I think I counted like around 40 bullets on the previous slide. So you had 40 participants or more on the slides where you listed partners? And what's your attrition rate there? Like people is it stable?
As coaches,
Yes.
they've been pretty stable. Again, like, an example is one system that you may start off as a literacy coach and then roll into a assistant principal or leadership position, but still hold the role of literacy person on that campus. But we see it in and out. We see it in and out.
And I asked
But
that.
they stay for the entire year.
Yes, ma'am. And I asked that, I share Ms. Romer's concern about sustainability on how that, or this initiative will be operationalized, so to speak, in districts in the state.
But I think about the pilot though, with those 13 schools, I know, like, it just depends on systems. We do have a substantial number of coaches that still remain from the pilot, with the systems such as TNG, I think Rapid. So if it's solid there, they have a plan, we do tend to see the coaches staying.
Thank you. And as a gentle recommendation, those numbers are important, I think, for people to consider and to be able to see. Thank you.
Any public comment? Okay, so for a motion to receive, motion and a second to accept the consideration of the updated report regarding the literacy coaching initiative. Motion to approve. From Caroline Romer and Deshae Oaks second. So once again, have a motion from Caroline Romer and a second from Deshae Oaks to receive the consideration of an updated report regarding the literacy coaching initiative. Are there any objections? Hearing no opposition, opposition. Thank you. The motion passes. All right. Consideration of an updated report regarding Louisiana literacy professional learning. Ask for a motion and a second to receive a consideration of the updated report regarding the Louisiana literacy professional learning.
So moved.
In a second. In a second. In a second. All right. To present, we have Hannah Boozer and we have Dr. Jenna Shaskell.
All right, thank you, Janae. So we will dive into our next agenda item. We wanted to bring you all today just some updates around Act 108. This too, I think is one of the most important things that we've put into place over the last few years that has had the most significant impact in our classroom. This comes from legislation from the 2021 session, Act 108, which requires our kindergarten through third grade teachers and leaders to be trained in the science of reading. We know that training takes approximately, we've heard anywhere from 40 to 60 hours. So we like to say about 50 hours or so. It is a substantial lift on educators. We have no doubt, but I'll be the first to tell you, my opinion is that it is worth it, and we are seeing the impact in classrooms. We are seeing the changes in instructional practices. We're talking with educators out in the field who are, for the most part, very excited about it and excited about implementing changes in their classrooms around the science of reading. So this is another initiative that's been very important for us to think about sustainability. And so we've thought about that in a variety of ways. We wanted to make sure that we were providing this update here today, but also talking to you about the sustainability of Act 108 and what it looks like to make sure that all of those kindergarten who are great educators receive that training, not just now when we've had ESSER funding available, but what happens in the aftermath. And so we'll start today with the pillars of our literacy strategy. These pillars actually come from the coaching pilot of 2020. These pillars were discovered because we really wanted something that would undergird our work and really ground our literacy strategy And so we created these pillars that came out of that initial action research that year that we had of the pilot. And we actually considered those 13 schools a 2-year pilot because they continued to go first in the second year. They led the way for our other schools and our other schools followed behind. And so they were the first schools to undergo, which wasn't even known yet as the Act 108 training, but their science of reading training, the coaches and the educators in those buildings underwent that training. But these literacy pillars are really important to grounding our work. And we know that setting those literacy goals and then implementing those explicit literacy interventions and extensions are very lofty work. It is hard for educators. It is not something that we take lightly. That shifts from maybe what educators were comfortable doing, what they knew to do, to what we are now asking them to do. And so that ongoing professional growth pillar is so important. So we want to highlight that pillar, especially when we think about Act 108. But knowing that the Act 108 training isn't all that we do, that our literacy team actually is responsible for a plethora of other training. And right now their work is very involved in what is the aftermath of the science of reading training? How do you connect what happens in that science of reading training to now what happens in classrooms every day? How is it implemented through those curricular resources that teachers are using in the classroom? This is a little timeline just showing where we've been. That literacy coaching pilot determined those best practices that really came out through our pillars and were birthed through our pillars. And Act 108 asked us as a Department of Education to identify vendors for school systems to choose from to implement their Act 108 training. And through allocations of our ESSER state set-aside dollars, we were able to fund the training through vendors. And so we have 4 approved vendors for the Act 108 training. We also had a waiver process for school systems to apply for if they were able to show that they were selecting comparable training to the 4 approved vendor providers. And so at this point, a lot of our state is completing or very close to completing their Act 108 training, which is no small feat via that vendor support. But we also recognize that in the aftermath of ESSER, we were going to need something long-term for our educators to use. So even though we had, I'll call it sister legislation to Act 108 that had us work with our educator preparation providers to update coursework, update the practice exam around reading, we knew that our candidates would be entering the field upon graduation and becoming new teachers, and they would be prepared with their science of reading coursework through their ed prep processes and coursework. But we also knew that there will always be outliers. We'll have teachers coming in from other states. For a variety of reasons, we knew that we would need a science of reading training that we owned in perpetuity that was able to be available across the state and also available for our teacher preparation partners in this work. They can utilize this training that we call the Art of Teaching Reading training, which will be free to our Louisiana educators, also free for our educator preparation providers to access so that they can utilize it in their coursework. We set a goal around the completion of Act 108 training, a public goal through a key performance indicator. And in the legislation requires us to do a data collection every May based on April completion. So this takes a look at an annual snapshot of what educators have completed their Act 108 training. And so in 2022, when we did that first snapshot, we only had about 9%. We are estimating currently a 75% completion rate. This is more anecdotal and through, I'll say, less secure data collection measures than the one we are about to collect. So it's really an estimate, which is why it's a different color there. But our target is that by this May, when we do that data collection, we'll have 90% of our educators who have completed the training. Now, some school systems across the state selected letters, which is a 2-year training. And so we suspect we will still have some outliers who have not completed, and we suspect some folks will still take a little bit longer. especially if they selected that 2-year route through letters. And although this is a May data collection period, I would really think by this summer, we'll have an even higher rate because some educators utilize their time during the summer to complete their training, and school systems probably support their educators in doing that when out of school. And so just wanted to recognize here the folks who are over a 90% completion rate for their system. So you see we have a mix of our traditional public schools, our public charter schools here, but really proud of these systems who have that over 90% completion rate. And the next slide shows over 100%, well, not over, can't go over, but who are at a 100% completion rate. So really proud of these folks for going first, digging in, understanding the difference that this training was going to make for their educators and for their students. And so it's a pretty long list, and we're excited to add more to this list in the next few months as we do that next data collection. So I'll turn it over to Shannon next. She's going to talk a little bit about additional professional learning opportunities because, as I said earlier, our literacy team they are truly literacy experts, and they provide amazing and outstanding literacy training themselves. And she'll also be able to showcase for us what our own Louisiana Science of Reading training is going to look like.
This really, so are the systems or school or charter schools that maybe selected letters, are they not reflected in the 90 and 100 because they're not fit?
Or they could be reflected. Some of them are. Yeah. Some of them are. Okay, thank you. And some of them may be, you know, those who I suspect may finish over this summer. They maybe need a little more.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the other professional learning opportunities that we have. You heard Dr. Early talking about the communities of practice, the field visits. You've heard Dr. Chesson talk about the Act 108 training. So here are a few more opportunities. So we do have regional collaborations that we've embedded literacy into. So most recently, twice this year, we have a smaller rural system, Northeast collaboration that we've been working with some of our more rural school systems to talk about what it looks like for them. And so we've embedded literacy into those. Of course, we have our annual summit, our teacher leader summit. We've had huge requests for literacy presentations there. Our presentations always are out the door, standing, trying to get in. And so we're always excited for the opportunity to present at the Teacher Leader Summit. This past year, the department has offered what they called Summit Extensions. And so that was to reach out to school system leaders to come in and continue to get that learning throughout the year. This year, we've focused on building district level ILT, so those instructional leadership teams at the district level. And we've also focused on teacher collaboration time and what does it look like for teachers to come together during the school day to collaborate around those high quality instructional materials and how to embed a lot of this literacy policy into those teacher collaboration times. And so the picture you see up here was actually what we call the teacher collaboration in a bubble. So we had several schools that, because these were regional, that participated and showed district leaders an actual teacher collaboration time. And so they got to see how they're utilizing their high quality instructional materials, how they're embedding what they've learned through that Act 108 training, how they're incorporating their literacy screener data. And this just provided an opportunity to not just see it in action, but also to have those conversations around how do school system leaders, how do school leaders support that teacher collaboration time. And then, of course, we will go on the road again. This will be our third summer where we will have our literacy regional PD tour. And so we go across the state during the summer, and I'm saying we, meaning my literacy team. So I'll announce, you met the coaching team, but we have another team in the division, and that's our professional development team. We kind of call them our strategy team now because they're in the field hearing about what teachers need, what leaders need, and then they go and develop either those resources or provide that professional development. So we have Natalie Kleber, who leads that team. And we also have Haley Muntz, who's also on that team, and we're currently hiring for another spot for that team. And then just to not leave her out, one more additional team member I have, Holly Manson, she oversees all of our tutoring work, but she also supports our tutors in bringing in this professional development and how they can use this with their tutors or the materials that we have as well. So now what I'm gonna do is transition over to actually preview what our science of reading training will look like. Our teaching in art of reading training. This is in partnership with Louisiana Tech. So they are working alongside of state and national leaders to develop this training. And it will be housed in our Canopy professional learning platform. So I'm going to kind of give you a sneak peek of, and you were the first ones to see this. So you'll get a little sneak peek of what it will look like. Okay, so the one we're going to preview right now is our module 4, which is our around oral language. Please note that you'll see some things in here. This is still currently being built out. So you'll see some words like SCORM, which is some technical word that will be replaced later when all this goes live. But each module starts off with an overview where they introduce the instructor. And so, as I mentioned, some of those will be some state experts across, literacy experts across the state. And then we also have some that are national. We also have some that started as a Louisiana professor and have since moved on to another state. And so each module will be introduced by a different professor. And so they'll have a video at the beginning that introduces themselves as well as the module. Here you'll see this little backpack. Each one of these little badges they earn as they complete their module. So they will already earn some badges here on their toolbox, their backpack that they have with all of their new learning. Again, continuing into the introduction, we'll introduce the objectives and essential questions for that particular module. It lets them know what their estimated completion time is. There's also some interactive activities, so some handouts that they'll need, any additional materials they may need. Each one starts with a little quiz just to kind of help them see what information around this topic they may already know. And then it goes into all the different parts of the module. And so I opened one of them. So here you can see it continues to give them the new learning. Some of them are interactive. So here you can click on and get a little information. Sometimes you may see like flashcards, you may see word sorts, you may see where they're connecting, it looks like puzzle pieces and are connecting terms with definitions. Scroll through these. And each one of these, by the way, each one of these images mirrors their instructor. And I'll show you again. Of course, they have some videos going along. And then at the end, they close it out by an additional quiz to see your increase of your knowledge. And then it provides them with some further reading if they'd like to do some more around that topic. It closes out with, this is called, all right, we have a Science of Reading Tech Connect podcast where they introduce a couple new ways that teachers or leaders can use technology. And then Dr. Horace Cummings from Louisiana Tech closes out with a video as well, which there she is for any of you who may know her. And which she was worried about. She's like, do you think it looks like it does look like you? And then you've earned your additional patch on your backpack. So we're really excited. We've
shown this to a few, teachers to get some feedback just around the accessibility of it, the friendliness of it, and we've gotten some really good feedback around it too. So I just wanted to kind of to show what this would look like. We're really excited about it. Not as Jenna mentioned, not just for our teachers, but our leaders, our teacher prep providers, our tutors, and this will all be free. They can sign up and take individual modules if they'd like to, or if they'd like to complete the entire training that would be available to them. So this will go live in October 2024. So this October.
And is there any way that we can see the scope and sequence? Is that fully developed?
That is developed. I can send that out. I can do that as a follow.
Any further questions from the commission? Okay, public comment? Right. Ask for a motion in a second to accept the consideration of an updated report regarding Louisiana literacy professional learning. Motion to approve.
Motion.
There's motion from Andromeda. Second. Second, Caroline Roma. Once again, I have a motion from Andromeda and a second from Caroline to receive the consideration of an updated report regarding Louisiana literacy professional learning. Are there any objections? Hearing there is no opposition, the motion so passes. And that concludes our agenda. The meeting is adjourned.
Yeah, no problem, Janae. Just wanted to, I think our last slide is actually empty, but it just says future meeting dates. That is because we know that it is now, beginning to be the height of legislative session. And so many of you involved in that. A lot of you are very busy over the next few months. And so, we would like to meet again after session for one, to give any updates. You know, Ms. Romer talked about some of the dyslexia bills that are going to move through. There don't seem to be any other major literacy bills. Have a few around dyslexia and a few around tutoring, but nothing else specifically around literacy. So we would break for a few months as a commission, but plan to come back after session to provide any updates. We can give you any input and feedback on any regulation that we would need to put into BESI policy that we would want your input and feedback on. So we will look to convene after session. We're thinking potentially July, as I know, you know, that second half of June is when a lot of folks kind of tend to leave town when session is over. And so we'll probably send out some dates even to get feedback. We'll see when the room is available, try to get some feedback. But in the meantime, you all know where to find us. So if you have any questions, any concerns, anything you just want to weigh in on that you might see or hear more about, y'all know how to reach out to us. So please certainly feel free to do so.
That now concludes the agenda. The meeting is adjourned.